and welcome to another video. This one is going to be a long one. I just know it because there is a lot of manga to get through. Interestingly enough, not a huge amount of like new releases. Partially because I made my major pre-orders with a different website than I use normally, and what I didn't realize was that they hold everything until everything's been released and then ship it out. I don't think they do partial shipping all that often, which was annoying, so I actually cancelled that order with them and then remade that order via Book Depository. I saved quite a bit of money actually, so I'm happy about that. But it means that a lot of the newer stuff, especially Viz stuff, just hasn't been released to me yet. I'm hoping it should be here in time for the second monthly updates video I'm going to be doing. In saying that, the few new releases that aren't held up from that are because I made them months and months and months and months and months ago. I pre-ordered them on Book Depository because they are some of my most highly anticipated series. But majority of the stuff I have today is manga, but it's sort of older releases. I have a few secondhand releases, but I also have just some like old release or older releases. They're not just new out. But this is going to be a super long video, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this intro. I hope you guys enjoy, and I'll just get straight into it. So first of all, I actually have a little bit of anime here as well. The first one being the standard UK release of The Devil is a Part-Timer. I used to have the limited edition US release of this. I've since sold that on. Not because I dislike that release, it's very nice, and I do really love this show. It's a fun little series if you've never seen it, but it's one that I think I don't really need the limited edition for. This was a lot cheaper than, you know, the standard. Even in the US, it is region B, so it's perfectly playable for me. And it's the Blu-rays only, and I think going forward I do want to try and get less and less DVDs in my collection. There are still going to be things that are, you know, fundamentally DVD releases, but just because they've never gotten a Blu-ray release. But I think I'm trying to lessen the amount of DVDs just because I don't watch them all that often, especially in like combo packs where you get both. I never watch the DVDs, and I don't really lend out stuff all that often to friends or anything. Maybe that makes me a bad friend, but generally I just don't use them. So for me, this was better. It helped with shelf space, and it is the format that I mainly watch. Great series. If you haven't seen it, I would recommend it. It's a funny little fish out of water series about the like Devil King and some of his cohort being put into modern day Japan and sort of having to struggle through adapting and not having magic. And he gets a job, you know, minimum wage job working at basically McDonald's, and his dedication to that job. It's funny, it's really sweet, and I wish we got another season of this. This is one that I think a second season would be very welcome. I don't say that about a lot of shows because I think that if your series has a good conclusion, it doesn't necessarily need any follow-ups, but I do think that this is one that would be fun having a bit more to enjoy. But the light novels are also available, the manga is available. So it's a great series in a lot of different formats, and I do recommend it. Next is another UK release. This one is a little bit more fancy. This is the, I'm just going to show you the box, not the like whole big thing. But this is the Ultimate Edition of Wolfsrain from the UK. This has been put out by Anime Limited. This came in like a big box. It has an A4 art book, you know, with info in it and stuff like that. A couple different posters, and inside here it actually has like a bunch of art cards as well. You can see we have pretty focal artwork. I think a lot of people might recognize this art. And here we have Anime Limited's pretty typical digipack release. And I think there's 3 or 4 discs, 4 Blu-ray discs. So no DVDs with this. And here in Australia and in the UK as well, we generally separate like the DVDs and the Blu-rays. You don't get combo packs, unlike the US where that's much more common. Mainly because I think some people still haven't made the transition over to Blu-ray yet, and some people don't want to pay for like a format that they don't use. But nowadays especially, they're the same price for the same thing, like DVD or Blu-ray, so I don't know if you actually save any money that way. But again, this is a show that I actually I hadn't seen up until earlier this year. I bought the US release, just the standard one, when it was really cheap on Amazon. So it gave me the opportunity to finally see it. Adored it, absolutely loved it. I had actually pre-ordered this before I had seen it because it has been announced like ages and ages ago, and unfortunately Anime Limited has gotten this sort of reputation of having things pushed back and back just because of like having to get things right. Like there's a lot of different things that can affect releases, especially in the UK, the BBFC being one of the major ones. But this one was a show that I'd always been interested in, and I do like a lot of Anime Limited's Ultimate releases because they normally do give you like fairly normal actual release you can put on your shelf, and then any extra stuff is pretty stylishly you know, designed or pretty easy to put away somewhere else. Yeah, but I absolutely adored the show when I finally had the opportunity to see it. I've since sold off my more standard US release, and yeah, finally got this. It's beautiful, highly recommended if you're a Wolfsrain fan. But again, this is a Region B release, so not necessarily going to work for a lot of people's players if you don't have a regionless Blu-ray player. But yeah, just gorgeous. And if you're like me and you haven't seen this show, it is a little bit older. It's one of Bones' first series. It's not their first, but it is one of the first ones they did. Yeah, really recommend you try it out. The dub is great, the subs are great. It's just a really good show, and I can understand why a lot of people still love it, or why it was a lot of people one of their first series they got into. Phenomenal show, and yeah, excited to finally have this release after so many delays. Next, for Blu-rays, we have something I just got today and I haven't even taken out of the plastic, and I'm probably not going to until I actually decide to rewatch it. But that is Revolutionary Girl Utena, or Utena, the 20th anniversary Ultra Edition. It's super thick, like Blu-ray case. It's got the 3 sets for the 3 different arcs, as well as like a really thick book, and just replica rose rings as well, which I think were also pre-order bonuses for the limited edition DVD sets, way back when Right Stuff first put those out. Yeah, I don't really know how to introduce Utena. It's one that I think if you haven't come across yet, it's one you should, because it's so influential, and I think it really shaped a lot of people's understanding. Even now, Ikuhara is creating some phenomenally interesting stuff. I'm really looking forward to his upcoming project, but all of his works are very heavy with the symbolism. They're ones you have to watch over and over again, and you learn something new, or you uncover something new every single time. Yeah, it's great. I haven't looked at these discs obviously yet, but from what I've heard, the transfer is beautiful for this set. So the Blu-ray upgrade is, the DVD upgrade for the recent Nozomi or Right Stuff release was wonderful. The Blu-ray is just a better on top of that. As I said, I'm trying to lean towards having more Blu-rays in the collection than DVDs, just because DVDs are so, like, they seem to be going more and more out of style. You can fit a lot more on a Blu-ray than you can a DVD, and just picture quality, sound quality, etc, etc, etc. And for me, the value on Blu-rays is going to at least last. Like, the discs are going to last a lot longer than some of the DVDs that I've experienced. So, you know, it's one that, it's a personal choice for me to just adjust to that, but I think it's nice to have such influential and well-known cult series like Utena getting Blu-ray releases now, that it seems more viable, because it's a show that stands up till this day, and I would hope that, like, even new generations of fans can enjoy it, because it really is just such a beautiful, beautiful show. Film, everything else. It took a long time for this particular release to come out, mainly because of the issue they had with the rings. I think the company they bought them from, they lost them in transit, and then so they had to get them remade, which pushed this set back 5 months. We were expecting this to come out in January, but yeah, the fact that it's here now, I can't complain. Finally glad to have this in the collection. Next we have some Australian DVDs, and this is for a show that I haven't seen yet, and the next show I'm going to be talking about is as well, and not one I've seen. But it's one that I've heard such great things about, and I'm excited to try. I wasn't a big fan of this author's previous work, so I've always been hesitant about starting this, but it's been long enough that I think I can give this show and maybe this manga, if I enjoy it, a proper try, and that is Nana Collection 1, and I also have Nana Collection 4. So I do also have 2 and 3 coming in the mail. They'll probably be in, you know, next pickup video. These ones I bought new, those ones I bought from Gumtree, which is like Craigslist. So those ones are secondhand but good condition. This show is one that I've never heard anyone say anything bad about it. It's a very well-known, like, I think people are confused on whether it's a shoujo or a josei. I would argue it's a josei from everything I've heard about it. About 2 girls called Nana who I think live together, and they have very different personalities, but regardless they become really good friends, and the sort of the drama of being a young person. As I said, I'm not a huge fan of Paradise Kiss? Is that what it's called? Yeah, Paradise Kiss. I watched that when I was in my last year of high school, so I was sort of the same age as the protagonist, and I watched it with my best friend, and both of us hated it, mainly because we found a lot of the main character's choices really terrible, and also George was just no, don't do that. But I think maybe that was just because we were so close to being in similar situations in regards to high school and stress and that sort of thing, and her choices in regards to her schooling were like so different from what myself and my best friend would have done, that we're just like, well, that was terrible, don't make those choices. And so in that regard it was really frustrating, which is why we didn't really like it at all. But I think having the couple year, I say a couple, it's been like 8 years since then, and having removed ourselves and grown up in different perspectives and all that, I think I'll enjoy this more. From what I've heard, this is the better of the two series, so I'm hoping that's the case. Yeah, it's just one that I think I've put off for long enough. If I don't like it, you know, not a huge investment, and I'm probably not going to be too chuffed, too worried about it. It'd be a shame because so many people do have good things to say about this series, but, you know, different tastes and all that. I do hope that it's really good, though. I'm looking forward to it, if nothing else. And it might not be, you know, my thing, but I'm curious, and I'm hoping to give it a shot, you know, a proper shot, and not preemptively judge it. So yes, Nana, the first collection and the fourth collection, which is the last one, I have the middle parts coming, and soon I will have all of Nana on the anime on DVD, at least, not the manga. And finally, for DVDs, we have another Australian release. This is one that I didn't actually I don't know how to explain this. I bought a lot of various anime DVDs from, again, like a Gumtree seller. They were selling a whole bunch of stuff for $50. And so a lot of the stuff I wasn't that interested in, but I knew other people that were, or I knew if I resold them I wouldn't be losing money. And this is really the only title of that lot that I had any interest in keeping. It's another one that I haven't seen before, and if I don't like it, then I'll probably just sell it on, because I haven't spent any money on this because I've already made my money back on the lot. But that is X, the complete collection. So this is the TV series of X. I know there's also a movie. I'm not a huge Clamp universe fan. I find it all a little too convoluted. I didn't grow up with Cardcaptor Sakura. I have seen Tsubasa and Holic. Holic was actually the first Clamp series I'd ever seen. I haven't seen what's that one? The Chobits. I haven't seen like Angel Links, is that the one? I haven't really seen a lot of Clamp stuff. I have seen Tsubasa, and I have seen Holic, as I said. And I've seen, I don't know, I think that's it. I haven't seen Kobato or anything like that. Just because, like I said, it's a little too convoluted. It gets a little too wrapped up in itself. Everything's connected and all this, that, whatever else. So yeah, just not really my thing. But X, from what I've heard, is pretty solid. I know the manga is on like permanent hiatus just because of disagreements and the issues with the powers and the realities of Japan and things like that. But I'm interested to see it because it is, I think, the only other work of theirs that I actually wanted to try. Yeah, I respect Clamp a whole lot just as a group and like having produced so many influential series, but they're not really my thing. I think they're phenomenal artists. I think their writing can get a bit too convoluted and sort of too clever in regards to like, oh, we made a reference to 15 other series we've done. Aren't we clever? It all exists within the same universe. And I'm like, I really don't care. Like, and that's why I don't really get into the Type Moon stuff, you know, Fate, Stay Night, and the other one, Garden of Sinners, and all of those. All the Type Moon stuff is just not my thing. They're good for what they are, but like having so many things existing within a single universe as like one big crossover is just like, that's not, I don't, okay, that like cool, but whatever. I think Sword Art Online and the other one, Axel World, also does that, like, cool, like, whatever, that's fine. But X, as I said, is one that I've never seen, I've never read, I just know sort of minimal about, and I think people like this show. I don't know. I know the movie's pretty, like, you either love it or hate it. I don't remember. Haven't seen the movie, haven't seen anything in regards to this aside from maybe a trailer, like, 10 years ago. But yeah, it is one that I wanted to try for a while. And so, yeah, I finally got the opportunity in regards to that with this lot. And if I don't like it, again, I'll just sell it on. It wasn't an investment at all for me. And I hope I do enjoy it. But, you know, either way, whatever. So just before I get into the manga, I do have a light novel I also picked up, and that is the single volume, newly released The Dark Maidens by Rikako Akiyoshi. This has been put out by Vertical and is written in a... so it's about a murder of a high school girl who's, I think, the president of some club, and so now all of the club members are telling the story from their perspective and sort of the murder and what happened. So it's very reminiscent of the short story In a Grove by Ryunosuke Akutegawa. If you're not familiar, like, very, very famous Japanese writer, regarded as like one of the greats. You may also recognize that plot as the Akira Kurosawa Rashomon movie, which is actually based off of that short story In a Grove, even though it uses the name of one of his other short stories. I don't really get, like, I don't know why that happened, but it's written in that style, which I think is pretty interesting. Yeah, so this is one that I wanted to read anyway on my own, but I'm actually going to be reading it for the EnglishLightNovels.com's summer reading. I don't know if it's a challenge or whatever. Their summer reading program. This is the book that we're going to be talking about at the end of this month. So yeah, I'm going to be participating, obviously, as I'm one of the contributors. And this is one that was suggested and I was really interested in. So I'm looking forward to reading this book and sharing my thoughts on it. It's not long, like it's really skinny. So I don't think it'll be that big of an investment, you know, actually reading time wise, but I'm interested in sort of the plot and the general idea of it. So I hope I enjoy it, because it's pretty interesting. And as just the single volume, you don't have to worry about like a lot of like one you have to collect every month or every couple months. It'll be good. I'm hoping. Okay, on to the part that people are actually interested in. The manga. I have a lot here. The first one, the first series is something I got from another Gumtree seller, so kind of like Craigslist. I got all 3 of these books for $15. It's the complete series, and that is Whispered Words by Takashi Ikeda. This is a omnibus release by One Piece Books. I think they're 3-in-1s. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure they're 3-in-1s. Really thick omnibuses, and these are one of the publisher's earlier releases, so the translation isn't super wonderful. I know there's certain issues with it, but it's one that I'd wanted to read for a while. It's, if you can't tell, a Yuri series, pretty well regarded, and one that I've been interested in for a long time. But the single, like the one of these is about $20-odd for me. So being able to get the entire series for less than one book was a really great find. So we have the first volume, we have the second volume, and the back. And then we have the third and final volume. I think this one is a little bit more recent than these ones. I don't really remember or know. But yeah, one that I've wanted to get into for a long time. I'm hoping I enjoy it. Yuri can be a little bit hit or miss for me. I think I've mentioned that numerous times before. I do like Yuri. I think it has a lot of potential, but sometimes that potential is never realized. I think there's at least with stuff that's being localized in English, or released in English, I should say, there's a distinct lack of different stories or diversity in settings within the genre. They're generally these high school, private girls' school set romances, and I like it when things can be, shaken up a little bit. This one seems to be along that route, private girls' school, but everything I've heard is good. I'm putting it sort of, I don't know if it's as strong as like a Kase-san or a Sweet Blue Flowers, which are both great series for very different reasons. But I think because it is longer, it has a little bit more backbone insofar as plot and actual character development, and it's not just fluff or skeevy sort of too sexual, which I think is the other side of Yuri, that just seems a little bit too voyeuristic. I don't know, is that the right word? I think so. Where it just is like, oh, okay, I'm a little bit uncomfortable. I don't just read Yuri to watch girls, making out. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this one. I'm hoping it's really good. Because it's one that I've wanted to try, again, for a long time. You're gonna hear that phrase quite a bit in this video, so, look forward to that. But it's good for me to have the whole series at once. There's been times where I wanted to get just the first volume, but then just thought about it and was like, well, I'll get back to it. It doesn't seem like it's in any rush to go out of print or anything, so I'm glad that I waited. I'm glad that I found the complete series for such a great deal, and I look forward to reading it. Next, we have some more secondhand manga. These volumes and the next series I got from Better World Books, which is where I get majority of my secondhand manga. That's if you haven't seen any of my videos before, they're a website that actually sells library copies, so you generally get stickers and all of that sort of stuff. I'm not too stressed about it because I generally can remove them fairly easily with a hairdryer and then, you know, Goo Gone or whatever else you use. But these volumes are just some of the missing ones that I need from a really, really, really great sports series, and that is Cross Game Volume 4 and Volume 8. 8 is the final one, so all 17 volumes in these 2-in-1/3-in-1s have been put out. This is a Viz release. If you're not familiar with this series, it's a baseball manga by Mitsuru Adachi, who is just phenomenal. Basically the grandfather of baseball manga. There's plenty of wonderful mangaka who write about baseball, but Adachi, I think, is regarded as like definitely a master of the genre. In Cross Game, I think it's not necessarily his most well-known series. I would argue that that's probably Touch. But it is the only one of his manga that we've gotten in English, and I'm so glad that we did, even in this small capacity, get some of such an influential, you know, writer, artist's work available in English. I only have one more volume to collect now, and that's the 6th volume. If you haven't seen these releases before, the odd colored or the odd numbered books are orange and then the even numbered books are green, like this. So I just have one more green one to pick up, and then I'll have the complete series, and I'm looking forward to finally finishing this series because it is one that I started a long time ago and just got about halfway through, and then my library never got more, and it's one that I've been meaning to buy forever, and now I'm finally doing it. So yeah, I'm excited to finally, I have volume 4, so now I can read this one, and then volume 5. I think halfway through this volume was where I think it was this volume, or it might have been volume 3 that I finished, or where I stopped. It wouldn't be halfway through a volume. What the heck? I just said I read them in the library. But volume 5 I know is definitely new stuff for me. So once I get volume 6, I can finally sit down and read all of this. I think I'll read up to volume 5 before 6. I don't know. I'm just excited to finally have this series. It's one that I think, I know it's very well regarded, but if you're not super into like following manga releases or anything like that, it may have flown under a lot of people's radars. It came out a little bit before a lot of the sports manga hype blew up. You know, it predates, or especially this release, it predates, you know, Haikyuu and Yomushi Pedal and the other one, Kurika's Basketball, like a lot of the really popular stuff. Slam Dunk has been popular forever, and I think a lot of people know about that series, but this wasn't ever going to have the impact, I think, within the community that like a Slam Dunk has. So it was in that little time frame where people weren't really buying sports manga or weren't really following it all that closely. So maybe now is an opportunity to pick it up because it is complete. It's been complete for a couple of years now. And it's a great series. Definitely one to try out. Even if you're not a huge fan of baseball, I don't think this one hinges on like a intimate understanding of the sport. Adachi's manga, although they are all sports based, are very good at the character drama, more so than I think other sports manga. So it's definitely one I would recommend you picking up. Just great series. Next for manga we have another secondhand book from Bitter World Books here, and that is just one that I needed to sort of complete this series. I still have the later half to get, but that is volume 11 of Nabari no O. Yeah, pretty, not much to say about this one. It is just the 11th out of the 14 volumes. Yuki Kamitani is a mangaka I have grown a lot of interest in, mainly due to their recent series, Shimanami Tasagare. But Nabari no O is the only one of their series available in English, in its entirety, or full stop, really. And so I gave this series a second chance. I really hadn't given it a first chance. I just didn't really know what to make of it, and I had made some assumptions just because of the genre and the type of series it was, that I wasn't super impressed from the anime trailer. But having actually read it now, I'm actually enjoying it a whole lot. Great sort of ninja drama, less so than I think, like less comedy than I think a lot of people think when they think ninja. But it's pretty interesting about this kid who has like a hidden ninja art within his body, and then so all of these different factions are trying to get him to take that like crazy overpowered art and then become like the king or like the rulers of the shadow like world, or the ninja. It's when you explain the premise, it sounds terrible or pretty generic, but it's actually a decently solid character drama, and I've been enjoying it. I've only read up to volume 6 so far, so a little, almost halfway. But it's been good. I've been enjoying it, and I look forward to reading more. Next is another secondhand book. This one is in more battered up condition, but I'm not too worried about that. I did get this from Better World Books, but this is volume 1 of With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child by Keiko Tobe. This series was released in its entirety by Yen Press, in English, obviously. There's 8 volumes in all. The final one is a single volume, whereas all the previous ones are, I think, 2-in-1s, I think 2-in-1s. But it's, I think 17 volumes in Japan. And as you can probably tell from the title, is about a mother and her child who has autism, and sort of the differences from what she expected as a mother, having to really re-educate herself and adjust to her son's needs. And it's Keiko Tobe, from what I've read, did a lot of research on the subject. She spoke with a lot of mothers with autistic children, and so this isn't really a memoir manga, but it is done with the same purpose, I think, to educate, and I think to create an open dialogue about autism within society, and Japan in particular, because I don't think it's necessarily something that a lot of people understand. Personally, I don't have any direct or extended family members with autism, but I do know quite a few autistic people who are siblings of friends, or just, you know, my friends. I think autism is definitely something that people are becoming more and more aware of, because it's becoming something that is more and more common within society. I don't know if that's just from my perspective, but it's not, I think it's something that a lot of people have some familiarity with, regardless of whether they have autism or not. But this book has, or this series has won a whole slew of awards. It has a really empathetic and sensitive portrayal of autism. I think it's written really well. I've only read the first probably half of this book so far, but it's done in a really good way and respectful way, without, you know, removing the realities of the situation. This is one that I hadn't read previously, but I did know a fair amount about. I had seen the books in my local comic store years and years and years ago. I didn't pick it up at the time because I was a broke high school student. But it was something that always intrigued me. I have wanted to read it for a long time and just never, like, again, priorities, just never got around to it. 2 of the volumes, I think volume 5 and 7, are pretty hard to get. 5 more so than 7, I think. So I may never finish this series, but I did want to try and start buying it now rather than later, because I think it's something that is worth reading, and I didn't want to miss out entirely. I think there's Kindle editions though as well, so maybe you can read it that way and not have to hunt down out of print books. The other big thing about this story, if you know nothing about it, is that Keiko Tobe, the mangaka, actually died very suddenly whilst writing this. So the final book, volume 8, is just a single volume, and for the majority is just like rough drafts and storyboards and sort of her planned things for what she wanted to do with future comics. It is very unfortunate that, I mean, it's a tragedy that to die so suddenly and fairly young. And, you know, you really shouldn't speculate on where her plans were for this series, whether it was to follow the little boy Hikaru up until, you know, adulthood. But I think the story, he's in high school, so I think it does cover a majority of his, you know, childhood and adolescence at least, which I think is definitely, like, it's a definite chunk of life there. But yes, this story doesn't really have a conclusive ending just because, you know, it wasn't ever finished. But I don't think it's one that should be passed over just because of that. And I finally saw this book for really cheap on Better World Books. It's not in the best condition, and you can get new copies of this book fairly easily, so I would probably recommend you get a new book. But I'm not too fussed. I don't have a huge issue with, you know, that. The spine's in great condition. The pages are beautiful condition. They're still white and bright and gorgeously done. But yeah, I think this is maybe a series that not a huge amount of people are aware of. I don't know anyone who's talked about this series, at least within the current manga community. But it's one that I've wanted to read for a long, long, long time, and I just finally gotten off my butt and done it. Yeah, as I said, I might never finish this series. We'll see, because those 2 out-of-print volumes are very hard to find. But I do want to give this series the opportunity to be read, because from everything I've heard, it's very, very good, and I look forward to reading more. Next is a quick one that I mentioned from my last pickup videos. It's volume 4 of After School Charisma, so this is the final volume that I need for the complete series. Yeah, basically that. I spoke about the series in my last pickup video. It's about a near future where human cloning is viable, and so they set up this high school with these human clones of all these great world leaders and influencers and things like that. So on this cover we have Florence Nightingale, like Napoleon's in the thing, and Sigmund Freud and Einstein, you know, everyone, all these creatives and scientists and world leaders and everything else. Whilst there's also this conspiracy, or this group going around killing these clones and sort of fighting back against this idea of the morality of human cloning and what, you know, choices in life and that sort of thing. And I find it really interesting. Was put out in Australia by Chiang, which is a Singaporean publishing company, which has their English branch at least has gone bankrupt, so they withdrew. But luckily Viz licensed it in English pretty soon, or like at the same time. So I have just now finally gotten back to rebuying the series. I had previously read up to volume 7, which is half, you know, about half of the 12-volume series. I haven't finished it yet, but I do look forward to it because it is an interesting one. I'm also really looking forward to Kumiko Suekane's upcoming series, Versailles of the Dead, which is another like weird alt history story. Yeah, it's I think her premises are really interesting. That's something I said as well last time. But volume 4, just the final one I needed, and now that series is complete, so I'm happy about that. Now we're gonna get into the majority of this manga. It is this manga haul, I should say. It is mostly one series, or it is all just one series. That I did mention that I'd be picking up last video, so hopefully this shouldn't be too much of a surprise, but it is volume 3 to 22 of Kyu Hayashida's Dorohedoro. So we have volume 3, volume 4, volume 5, 6, 7, with personally this is my favorite character. I love Professor. Volume 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. These books get thicker and thicker the longer you go into the series. 18, 19, 20, 21, and finally 22. I have actually finished reading all of these. I cannot believe it. It took me about 2 days, but I'm fully caught up with Dorohedoro. I had previously read the first 4 volumes on Kindle, so I didn't go into this completely blind, but it is a series that I'd wanted to try for a while. It's a very dark, hyper-violent, grotesque seinen series, written by a woman, and I always appreciate that. But it's about 2 individuals who live in, you know, the world called, or the whole, which is basically, you know, the real world, called Kaiman and Nikaido. Nikaido owns a gyoza store, or restaurant, I should say. That makes more sense. And then Kaiman is sort of just her friend and eats there and doesn't pay his bill. But Kaiman suffers from, like, he has a lizard head, And so, and also amnesia. So the main premise is him trying to find out who he is and like who did this to him and get his face fixed up. Because in this world, there's like a different weird sorcerer dimension, and every so often sorcerers will come in to the hole to practice magic and just wreak havoc, basically. So we follow really both sides of this. We have the people within the hole, and then we have the sorcerers who live in this weird hell dimension where there's devils and magic, and it's all very weird, but fascinating. And I said initially when I showed off my first couple of volumes, I think I re-showed them off in here because there was maybe, I don't remember, but the first couple of volumes, and I will stand by this, I think this series has an element to it that is very much like a sitcom set within this weird, crazy, grotesque hell dimension, because it's absolutely hyper violent, disgusting. Like, this series is not for everyone, and I wouldn't, you know, flat out recommend it for everyone, but if you don't mind, you know, decapitated heads with the spine still connected and weird like mushrooms growing out of people and you know, just lots of weird shit, then I think maybe this is a series that you might enjoy. If you don't like that stuff, don't read it because there's a lot of that. But I find all of the characters really interesting. They have really wonderful relationships with each other and interactions. And as I read more and more and more of this series, where the greater plot line of like finding out who Kaiman is, and because there's a lot of, I don't want to say twists in regards to his identity, but with every question answered, like 5 different questions get asked. So it does get, I think, a little bit convoluted around volume 16, 17, 18, but it does sort of pick itself back up for these later volumes. 22 feels like, it's not quite the end, but I feel like the story will finish in the next, I want to say 3 volumes. I don't think the series will be much longer than, you know, 25, 27 volumes, because this really is like the final fight, and I don't like to put it in those terms, but most everything is being wrapped up. There's a lot of revelations and a lot of things happening and being done that I feel like, and I think most people would agree that this is sort of the final stretch. It's not going to go on too much longer. So maybe it's a good opportunity to pick it up if you haven't. But yeah, it's, for as much as this story has like really grotesque, violent, horrific, just absolutely, I don't want to say disgusting because that's not really the right word, shocking imagery and setting and actions. It's one that, like, it feels like you're reading about really good friends or family, and you can tell that there's a lot of like genuine emotion for all of these characters, for other characters within the story, which is, I mean, you don't necessarily take that as a given with this setting. I think Hayashida has a really vibrant imagination there's certainly a lot of stuff going on that is almost like too out there, almost a little bit avant-garde, but it's really, if you're a fan of horror movies, I think this is maybe one to try out. I'm not a fan of horror movies, but I don't have an issue with gore or any of that in manga and anime. And I'm a big baby in real life, but this sort of stuff doesn't affect me at all. But if it does for you, then I would say, you know, this is one probably to skip over. But if not, give it a chance, because it honestly surprised me. I really liked all of, like, I think En's people who work for him, Shin and Noi and Ebisu and Fujita, is all really interesting. And then also how their relationship with like Kaiman and Nikaido and the professor and the doctor, and it's really interesting. There's so many different relationships going on within this series. The professor's wife, their relationship is really interesting. The relationship that Nikaido has with, I don't want to spoil anything, but there's like a lot of really interesting stuff in this series, and if you give it a shot, you'll probably enjoy it. As I said, it's not for everyone, and I can't like blanket statement say you should definitely read this, but it's certainly one to look into if you're not put off by, you know, a lot of violence, gruesome stuff, and but also balanced with like some really well-meaning and genuine interactions and relationships, and also like a fairly compelling mystery. As I said, it does get a little bit convoluted, but I think when you have so many different pieces and characters working in tandem, it is going to get a little bit confusing, but I was never confused, if that makes sense. Anyway, really, really solid series, really good. I'm glad that I finally got around to buying it and reading it. Yeah, I am waiting for volume 2, because when I got this stack of the other ones, they gave me 2 copies of volume 13. I'm like, that's not what I wanted. So I'm waiting for the replacement volume 2. If anyone wants a volume 13, I have it. Just ask me, because I can ship it wherever. But yeah, Dorohedoro, pretty great series, and glad to finally have it in the collection. Now back to something maybe a little bit more expected from me. We have the most recent volume of Aka 13, Territory Inspection Department by Natsume Ono. This is the halfway point for this series. Series I initially saw via anime. Like I wasn't introduced to the series by the anime, but I'm a big Natsume Ono fan, so it's really no surprise that I picked up her most recent series. Yeah, as I said, 6 volumes long. It's not a huge one, but it does have a little bit more plot than some of her single volume books, obviously, or series. Her other longer volume, House of Five Leaves, is 8 volumes, and I think is one of her, really her strongest series she's put out so far. Aka is different, but has a lot of the same mood. I think it's hard to compare the two, but if you're a fan of Ono, you'll probably like this one. It does take a little bit of time for it to build up. It is very subtle initially, and then intrigue and suspense sort of naturally builds up from initial, like, more laid back, just questioning and sort of just seemingly innocuous stuff. I really enjoy this series. It's, again, not for everyone, but if you're wanting something a little bit more, almost like, I would say it's almost James Bond-esque, because it's, I mean, there's no huge, like, action set piece, but it is all very mental, and a lot of scheming and that sort of thing. So if you enjoy that, maybe try this one. It's a little bit different from how it first appears, and I think a lot of people got bored with the first volume because they didn't really know what to expect, and Ono is definitely a very leisurely writer. As I said, the first part of the story is very laid back, very Ono. It's exactly what she's used to. And it is much more, her stories are much more about the characters than any larger plot. But Akka, and House of Five Leaves, but Akka more so than I think any of her other stuff, does have like a full plot that contains all of the characters. And it's not, you know, a huge, you know, mind-altering shift of plotline and events, but it's still really, it's really good. It's really intriguing. It's very engaging. I really like how her characters interact, just in general, but in Akka as well. Yeah, she has this sort of organic feeling to her writing that I think isn't necessarily done so naturally in other series, and I liked this one a lot. It's pretty interesting, and if you haven't seen it, check out the anime. And if you haven't, like, you don't have to watch it, but watch that opening, because that opening is great. But it's a great show anyway, so you should watch it. Next, we have the conclusion of just a phenomenal series, one that I adore, and I think I've made no secret about that. This is Volume 9 of Princess Jellyfish by Akiko Higashimura. This is, it's a single volume, but it has a lot of extra stuff. You get a bunch of like interesting, you get the first chapter of Tokyo Tarareba Girls, which is her upcoming title. It is fully released in English on Kindle, but I'm looking forward to the print releases. But a lot of interviews, and also a color gallery, which oh man, is so beautiful. If nothing else, like, pick up this book for this, because man. But this is the final volume, because it is 17 volumes in Japan. And I've made no secret about how much I love this series. Not just from the characters to the premise to the realistic portrayal of the setting, or the setup, or just the general themes of this series. It's just, everything about it is wonderful, and I'm gonna gush, so apologies in advance, because I'm still feeling emotional about this book and the series in general, but the ending to this book just made me so happy, but also so sad that it was over. Because I went into this book a little bit hesitant, because I know that when it was coming out, or when the series was ending, people were not sure how she was going to finish it. It seemed like there was a lot of, like, people were worried that there was going to be some unresolved plot lines or whatever else. And whilst I don't think this series has a, you know, tied up in a bow, perfect conclusion where everything is spelled out for you and it's very obvious with everyone, like, what happens, I don't think this series needed that. And I appreciate Higashimura for ending it the way she did. I'm not gonna lie, I cried 3 times in this book just from emotion, just overwhelming emotion of positive, like, happiness, sadness, everything else. But overwhelmingly positive. It's not a sad ending, and I don't think anyone should go into this book expecting, like a full conclusive, this is what happened to everyone, this is how things worked out. You learn so much about the characters throughout this entire series. You grow to love them as who they are, which the biggest theme of this series, I think, which isn't necessarily that obvious with the first couple volumes, is learning to love yourself and accepting yourself, but still knowing and being able to grow and change and be accepted by other people. Insofar as if you're comfortable with yourself, it doesn't, you become that confident, beautiful person that you don't regard yourself as, which is that's a great message, moral, whatever. It's an important thing that I think people don't really think about all that often, but this book is I can't even put into words why I adore this series so much. I have spoken at length about, like, really appreciating how accurately the fashion industry is portrayed, and I mean that continues up until this point. And this book especially, I think, definitely put these characters on the right path of making their clothing line work. And it's so good. I loved the resolution of the sort of romantic plot lines, not quite plot lines. I loved the interaction between the brothers. I loved just everything about it. And that's not, like, I don't like saying just, oh, this is fantastic and everyone should read it and it's so great and the best, without giving proper reasoning for anything. I think if you probably have noticed if you watched my videos in any sort of capacity. But this story, I think, means a lot to a lot of people, and it embodies something so pure and hopeful and passionate, that if it had a unsatisfactory ending, it would still be a series I would recommend to everyone. But the fact that it has such a wonderfully, and to me at least, satisfactory ending, a phenomenal ending, just gives it that final push into something that I will reread probably you know, 5-10 years from now and still have these same emotions. And it's very hard to do that. Very hard to do that. Yeah, it's fun, it's funny, it's heartwarming, it's overwhelmingly joyful, and it's over. And I'm just... Thank you so much, Kodansha, because this was a series that I think a lot of people felt would never get a release, and when it was licensed, people just celebrated. And to be here now, after all of that, and after the series has finally come to its conclusion in English, and it's the end of this, I'm just so happy to have followed this story with these characters, and I hope, I mean, they're not even real, but I hope the best for them, because they deserve it, and I hope the best for everyone who's reading it, because it's one that I think appeals to a lot of people who don't necessarily see themselves as fitting in. And I mean, this is somewhat of proof that, you know, if you have a passion, if you love something, then, you know, you're a step ahead of everyone else. And you should embrace that and not have to worry about other people's perception of you. So, yeah, Princess Jellyfish Volume 9. If you're not reading it by now, I don't know what to say to convince you. But it's, yeah, it's great. If you are looking for a josei, and you don't mind comedy and, you know, a majority female cast, then I would say pick it up, because it's one of the best that we have available, full stop. You know, it's very, very good, and I can't wait to reread it and relive it again, because it's one that will always be in my collection, I think, regardless of where I'm living, what I'm doing, who I'm with. Yeah. Okay, enough of that emotional stuff, although I do get a little bit emotional about this series as well. The next volume is Volume 7 of Descending Stories, Showa Genroku Rakugo Shinju, another josei series, very, very different from the previous one, that is just phenomenal. Again, I've spoken at length about the series, but it's about a Rakugo master and sort of his life and the people who have affected him over his lifetime. The first volume sort of sets up a particular dynamic between two characters, but really this is Yakumo's story, or Bon, or Kiku, whatever you want to call him. And again, I've said this before, but he as a character is probably one of the most fascinating and interesting and compelling character studies I've ever seen in fiction at all. Manga, of course, inclusive, but I mean, the breadth of this story and his personal journey is something that you don't see a lot in media, and that's not to downplay any other part of this series, but really that is the fundamental foundation of this series, and without him it wouldn't be the story that it is. I think this series is, I mean, it's a drama. It's again one about passion and love and searching for yourself. but it's like a very different tone than Princess Jellyfish. And that's not it's great that you can have two such different things sort of handling similar themes, but just done in very different ways, and both done incredibly well. Yeah, I, again, said this before, I've found out about this series via the anime adaptation, which is on Crunchyroll. If you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend it. It was the best show or shows of the seasons that came out, which is high praise, because the first season came out when Yuri on Ice was coming out. Was it the first season or second season? One of the seasons came out when Yuri on Ice was coming out. And I mean, I love Yuri on Ice, but this is a different sort of story, and a very different tone. And it has a level of maturity that you don't see in fiction all that often, especially just like more popular fiction. It's a series that I think was overlooked by a lot of people because there was a lot of stuff coming out at the same time. ReZero was out, Yuri on Ice was out, as I said. A bunch of stuff, can't even remember. But it's not one that I think appeals to the mainstream because it is a very quiet, character-focused, you know, obscure art form series, a little bit like Chihaifu. I don't think a huge amount of people were following that when the anime initially came out, because it is so different from what you expect from a sports anime. But yeah, this is one that I'm just so happy we're getting. It's going to be 10 volumes in all. It is complete in Japan. Another miraculous Kodansha release. I think Kodansha is probably my favorite publisher currently. I have all of the publishers have series that I'm very, very excited and enthusiastic about. You know, Viz, Yen, even Udon, you know, One Piece Books, Seven Seas, of course, even Dark Horse. But Kodansha consistently has gone above and beyond my expectations with what I would expect as possible. So yeah, it's one that I wholeheartedly recommend, especially if you like character drama, and generational family relationships. It's interesting. Yeah, it's really good and one of my favorites, and yeah, just solid read. Give it a shot if you haven't. Finally, for manga, we have a book that I think a lot of people have been picking up for good reason. It was very highly anticipated and one that I was very excited for, especially when it was initially announced. And that is Go Nagai's Devilman, the Complete Collection 1. This series is going to be released in 2 omnibus hardcover releases as part of Seven Seas' like classic collection line. I know that Space Battleship Yamato has gotten the same sort of release just recently this month. Yeah, I think a lot of people became a lot more interested in Nagai's work, and Devilman in particular, with the very recent Devilman Crybaby adaptation on Netflix. Phenomenal show if you haven't seen it. Really solid adaptation of the work. I'm a big fan of the director already, and it was just phenomenally well done. But Go Nagai is one of those creators who is incredibly influential, and you can tell he had a lot of fun with all of his manga series. They're all incredibly like weird and quirky and perverted and just this interesting mix of like, I don't know, but Devilman even more so than I think some of the Mazinger or Cutie Honey is one that has stuck within the collective consciousness, I think, a little bit better. And if only because the 80s OVAs had the most hilarious dub and were pretty widely spread, you know, in early anime fandom days. And obviously, like, there's been a lot of Devilman related and influenced products and media and stuff from Japan, so it's one that I think has had all of his series have had a huge influence, but Devilman I think is the one that most people were maybe previously familiar with, and if they weren't, have recently been introduced to by this new series. I have only read part of this book. It's very good. I think they did a great job with keeping the translation true to what was expected, insofar as like being pretty memey. The artwork in this is Nagai, so it's, I don't know how many people are familiar with Go Nagai's work, but I mean he's very of his time, and he has a very him style. I'm being pretty careful because I don't know how much nudity is going to be shown yet in certain panels. But yeah, there's this series in particular has had some art changes over the years with like subsequent re-releases. So some people get upset about that. I don't really have a comparison. But yeah, Devilman is like an interesting mix of like this pretty serious take on like humanity and that sort of thing, but also is treated with this level of like hilarity because there is so much like meme content within it. It's one you have to respect whilst also laughing at. I'm glad that Seven Seas has started their classic collection. I think there's definitely a gap within licensing, aside from Tezuka stuff and a little bit of like older shoujo. We don't see classic manga nearly as often as we should, and having more you know, Matsumoto and Nagai work available and licensed is definitely a step in the right direction. Beautiful book. Seven Seas has done a great job. Would definitely recommend these, especially if you're curious in the franchise and where it all started. I know Seven Seas has also licensed a bunch of like modern spin-offs or remakes or reboots or whatever else. I haven't, you know, really dove into any of them, but you know, they all look fairly interesting and whatever else. Yeah, I mean, there's not much to say about Devilman at this point that you probably haven't heard 15 times before. It's a solid classic manga. I'm looking forward to having it all when the second part comes out. It's one that I think a lot of people should have in their collection, especially if you're interested in, or if you were interested in the Devilman Crybaby recent anime. It's a very influential part of Japanese media, and it's one that I think I'm glad has stayed somewhat prominent within people's collective minds. Yeah, it's good. It's it's good. There's some funny parts that aren't really, I don't think, intentionally funny. But it makes it enjoyable, and you know, you can't complain about that. There's quite a bit of like nudity, male and female, and that, so don't, if you're, you know, not too if you're offended by that, then maybe don't pick this up. But there's like weird demons with faces on breasts and like weird stuff. You know, demons, they're weird. But yeah, great series. Glad to finally have it. And yeah, looking forward to the second half. Oh my goodness, that is everything that I got for this last 2 weeks. That was so much to get through. Next pickup video won't be nearly as long because Dorohedoro especially took up a lot of that time, and, you know, made up a really big chunk of this week's, or today's video. That plus, you know, some of these older releases like After School Charisma, Cross Game, Whispered Words. I wasn't expecting to get Whispered Words at all, just, you know, the timing on that, and that the seller was just too good of a deal to pass up, especially for a series I was interested in already. Next video will likely be just new stuff. I have maybe like 1 or 2 secondhand manga coming, which I think, yeah, I have 1 Better Worlds book order which has 2 secondhand manga in it, obviously. So that should be coming. I have 1 older release that I bought new, that is related to one of these series in this stack, which will just be like, because that one is in particular is very cheap, so I decided to get it now rather than wait. I will get those middle parts of Nana, and I think I have yeah, aside from that, it will probably just be new releases for this month in particular. I don't think I have any anime coming. Maybe. Maybe one Australian release coming. Which is from a series that I've been buying sort of a lot of recently, so we'll see. I know that it's just been released and shipped to me, so it'll probably be there. A little bit of anime, and then some more recent manga, as well as like less than a handful of some older stuff, secondhand stuff. But yes, probably nowhere near the length of this video. Next month I will have some UK stuff that I'm pretty excited about and highly anticipating, in regards to anime. And yeah, after that it should just be like the standard pre-order stuff. I don't think I'll have a huge amount of older releases, because I've said it before and I'll say it again. I am actually saving money, because I have a trip to South Korea at the end of September. So September is 9th, so about 3 months from now, 3.5 months from now, which is not a huge amount of time. I'm only going to be gone for a week. It won't, I don't think, impact videos at all. And yeah, it's not going to be a huge, like, me gone from YouTube for a long time, but it does mean that my spending is not like, I'm really not going to be buying a whole lot. All of my pre-orders up until November are already paid for, so I just get them whenever they're shipped to me. So I haven't actually spent any money on manga, or new manga, I should say, recently. I have spent money on manga this last month. But yeah, it shouldn't be too much more, and it shouldn't be a video this long. But thank you guys so much for watching. I know these always get long, but I know at least some of you enjoy it. As always, my Twitter is in the description below, so if you want to follow me there, I'm on fairly regularly, not every day, but I do see it quite a bit. And if you message me or, you know, contact me, I'm fairly easy to get in contact with there. I also have my book depository affiliate link down there. Again, no obligation to use that, but it is there if you use the website and you feel so inclined to support me just a little. I really appreciate it. As I've said numerous times, that's pretty much the only place I get new books. It's fantastic, free worldwide shipping. The prices are, at least for me, just always cheaper than anywhere else. So that's how I save money by when I'm buying my stuff. It's just a great service, and they have great customer service there as well. So yeah, if you haven't used the website before, I really recommend it. If you have, then you already know how good it is. It does take a little while to ship, but you know, you can't complain when you're getting free shipping. Yeah, it's great. But as I said, you guys, I'm so glad that you guys seem to enjoy this. I'm getting closer to 2,000 subscribers as well, which is huge. Like, that's amazing. Never expected that. But it's just getting closer and closer, and I really appreciate it. Like, that's amazing. I never expected that when I started this channel. I never had a goal to reach a certain number. I honestly didn't think too many people would be super interested in my videos, but what do I know, apparently. If you've enjoyed these videos, leave me a comment or tell me about whether you've seen any of these titles or read any of these things, or if you haven't and you're interested or not interested. I always enjoy comments. I do really love reading them. Yeah, so just let me know. I should have on my Twitter a poll coming up about which art book I should show off next. So if you're interested in a particular book, maybe you know, get in on that and make your vote count. But until next time, guys, I hope you've enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye till then.